Some of the biggest, known as megachurches, are facing challenges as the culture around organized religion changes.
Once seen as unstoppable symbols of growth and influence, many of America's largest churches are suddenly facing an uncertain future. Could nearly half of these megachurches vanish within just a few years? As sprawling campuses lose their crowds and financial pressures mount, what once looked like lasting success is rapidly unraveling. From scandal-plagued leaders to shifting cultural tides, the forces toppling megachurches run deeper than you might expect. This story goes beyond empty seats. It reveals a profound transformation in how millions now experience faith, community, and worship in America. Signs of decline in megachurches. Across the United States, some of the nation's largest megachurches are facing challenges that once would have seemed unimaginable. Attendance numbers are dropping, financial pressures are growing, and ministries that once thrived are now struggling just to maintain routine operations. Massive sanctuaries built to hold thousands often sit half-empty, symbolizing a shrinking influence. These setbacks no longer appear as isolated incidents, but are quietly weaving together to reveal a larger, troubling pattern. Parking lots that used to overflow with cars now show wide-open spaces, while the energy and momentum that fueled expansion have slowed dramatically. Churches once known as unstoppable forces in American Christianity are showing cracks beneath their polished surfaces. The decline is not just about fewer people sitting in pews. It represents a shift that touches nearly every aspect of megachurch life, from giving and programming to leadership and outreach. Financial difficulties have pushed some churches to drastic measures. Harvest Bible Chapel, once a prominent ministry, filed for bankruptcy after mounting debt and shrinking attendance. Similarly, California's Crystal Cathedral was sold following financial collapse. Seattle's Mars Hill Church dissolved after leadership scandals shook its foundation. These high-profile struggles underscore a growing reality. The megachurch boom that many counted on is now faltering on multiple fronts simultaneously. The pressure extends beyond these headline cases. Across the country, churches designed to serve thousands now minister to significantly smaller congregations, yet they still must bear the costs of maintaining enormous properties. Utilities, mortgages, technology, and staffing expenses remain high, even as giving decreases. What once seemed manageable debt suddenly becomes overwhelming, forcing ministries to rethink everything from budgets to their very mission. What makes this situation especially striking is that these challenges didn't just appear overnight. The shrinking attendance and the financial struggles are kind of the visible outcome of deeper, longer trends that have been evolving beneath the surface for years. The system that was built on rapid, continuous growth has started to falter, and it's exposing a vulnerability that plenty of people did not anticipate. The whole cycle of expansion and constant momentum, once treated like something foolproof, now seems unsustainable, at least in the way it was imagined. As congregations shrink and debts grow, leaders are facing hard choices, like downsizing ministries, selling property, closing campuses, or pivoting toward fresh models. It's a tough reality for ministries that have been powered by the promise of endless growth and influence. And instead of being a short-lived crisis, this looks like it may point to a more fundamental transformation in American church life. These visible signs are starting the first part of a story not only about decline, but about change. Change that really questions assumptions about what the future holds for big churches. The pressures building on megachurches suggest that what comes next could rewrite how faith is practiced and experienced across America. But to understand why this shift is happening now, we have to first look back at the rise that made these churches so influential. The remarkable growth of megachurches over the last several decades set the stage for this moment, revealing how success and failure are often two sides of the same coin. The rise and peak of megachurches. To grasp the challenges megachurches face today, we need to explore the era when they defined religious life in America through rapid expansion and ambition. During the early 1990s, only a few hundred churches fit the megachurch label, generally defined by congregations of 2,000 or more. But over the following decades, that number surged dramatically, more than doubling by the early 2000s and growing to over 1,000 by 2020. These churches were no longer just places of worship. They became sprawling complexes with cafes, bookstores, fitness centers, theaters, and children's facilities. The experience was carefully crafted to feel less like a traditional church and more like an all-encompassing community hub. It was a model designed to serve nearly every aspect of family life and draw in larger, more diverse crowds. Lakewood Church in Houston stands as a powerful symbol of this growth, transforming a former professional sports arena into one of the largest worship centers in the country, with seating for over 16,000 people. This conversion highlighted the megachurch movement's ambition and vision, a faith built not from scratch, but from repurposed spaces that could hold tens of thousands. Across America, similar investments followed. Churches poured money into larger sanctuaries with advanced lighting, concert-quality sound systems, and professional media teams. Multiple campuses stretched to reach expanding populations. Services quickly became polished productions, attracting live attendees and online viewers alike, turning Sunday worship into a multimedia event. At the heart of this success were charismatic, highly recognizable pastors. Many became best-selling authors, television hosts, or conference leaders with influence way beyond their local congregations. Their personalities seemed to turn individual churches into national brands, pulling in thousands who wanted to connect with the pulse they sparked on stage, in books, or on the air. But this rise came at a steep price. Through the late 1990s and early 2000s, megachurches borrowed billions to fund new campuses, land purchases, parking structures, and operational costs. Lenders often viewed these loans as safe bets because attendance was climbing and giving stayed solid. Every new building felt like it proved the reason for the next expansion. The method created this almost unbreakable loop. More attendance meant more giving, and more giving paid for bigger projects. Then those projects drew in even more people. It was a pattern that looked like it could just keep going indefinitely, until it didn't. Underneath all that, a dangerous fragility was slowly forming, stitched into the structure of megachurch ministries itself. A lot of churches became closely bound to the personality and vision of their lead pastors. When trust in these figures was strong, the whole system worked well. Still, this concentration of influence around a few individuals planted the seeds for later trouble that would come into sharper focus as leadership problems started to show up. The vulnerabilities built into megachurch success stories would soon be exposed by scandals that shocked congregations and eroded trust in ways money alone could never repair. Leadership crises and scandals. For years, the greatest threat many saw to megachurches was external, declining attendance or financial difficulties. Instead, some of the most damaging blows came from within. High-profile leadership controversies revealed deeper problems that shook the foundation of trust these churches relied on, showing how fragile their success really was. Take Mars Hill Church in Seattle. It grew rapidly under Pastor Mark Driscoll, whose bold style attracted thousands across multiple campuses. But behind the scenes, allegations of abusive leadership and misuse of authority surfaced. When these concerns reached a tipping point, Driscoll resigned in 2014, and the church dissolved its entire network within months. One of the fastest-growing churches suddenly disappeared almost as quickly as it had risen. Similar stories have played out elsewhere. Harvest Bible Chapel expanded under James MacDonald, developing multiple campuses and a media presence. Yet, financial questions, leadership conflicts, and investigations eroded confidence. After MacDonald's removal, attendance and influence declined sharply. demonstrating how fragile momentum can be when credibility is lost. Willow Creek Community Church, long respected as a leadership model, faced a defining moment in 2018. Founder Bill Hybels stepped down amid misconduct allegations, prompting widespread reflection on accountability and governance. This event wasn't just about one leader's resignation. It sparked questions about the structures that allowed problems to persist unnoticed or unaddressed. Hillsong Church's global reach did not shield it either. After Pastor Carl Lentz was ousted due to moral and leadership failures, the spotlight intensified on celebrity pastors and the pitfalls of fame within church culture. The controversy opened broader conversations about transparency and power in modern religious institutions. Outside individual churches, investigations within major evangelical groups, including the Southern Baptist Convention, exposed long-standing failures to deal adequately with abuse allegations. These reports intensified scrutiny and raised doubts about the sufficiency of existing oversight systems. What made these crises especially significant wasn't just the actions of a few individuals. They revealed structural weaknesses, leadership boards often internal, limited financial transparency, and governance models that concentrated power in small groups. When authority is too centralized, correcting serious issues becomes a massive challenge. For many church members, these events marked a turning point. Some continued their faith with greater caution, while others left organized religion altogether. Attendance shrank, giving slowed, and long-standing confidence in megachurches eroded. What appeared stable suddenly felt uncertain. As these leadership crises reshaped the landscape, an even greater challenge loomed, one that would confront every church simultaneously and test the very model on which megachurches were built. Impact of the pandemic on attendance. The global pandemic hit churches across America in an unprecedented way. Almost overnight in 2020, sanctuaries built to gather thousands fell eerily silent. Worship teams performed in empty rooms, and pastors found themselves preaching to cameras rather than congregations. Services that once depended on the energy of a live audience shifted almost entirely online, adapting quickly, but under duress. At first, most church leaders viewed these changes as temporary disruptions. The hope was that once restrictions lifted, congregations would flood back to fill the pews. Yet as in-person worship resumed slowly, many churches discovered a startling new reality. A significant portion of their regular attenders chose not to return. Reports showed some large ministries reclaiming only roughly 60 to 70% of their previous attendance. The decline was particularly sharp among younger families and individuals who had attended sporadically before the pandemic. For megachurches built on constant growth and large crowds, these missing seats had enormous consequences. Operating expansive campuses requires budgets that cover mortgages, utility bills, maintenance, staff salaries, technology, and insurance. Expenses that don't shrink just because fewer people show up. That imbalance between decreased giving and steady overhead put a lot of ministries under serious financial stress. Some started trimming staff, delaying upcoming expansion plans, or dialing back their programs altogether. Others closed satellite campuses or began financial reorganizing efforts to steady their day-to-day operations. For many, the aim shifted from expansion toward simply keeping what they already had. But the financial hit wasn't the only major shift the pandemic triggered. It also changed how millions of Americans saw the church itself. With online worship available from living rooms, plus smartphones and laptops, what used to feel like a hard requirement became for some a matter of preference. That flexibility made people question whether showing up at a huge physical campus every week was truly necessary for their faith. At the same time, the internet pushed more transparency into view, so church finances and leadership choices ended up with sharper public attention. Budgets, wages, property values, and donations became common subjects of conversation on social media and in different forums. Even when the details weren't perfectly clear, the way people perceived stewardship and priorities still shaped how large church organizations were judged. In the end, the pandemic acted like a spark that revealed deep weaknesses in the megachurch model, weaknesses that had been forming for years. It knocked down the belief that once the emergency ended, everything would just resume as normal. Instead, it showed that real change was already in motion. It became clear that a new chapter was beginning, one that would demand fresh thinking about what it means to build community and nurture faith in a world less bound to massive buildings and constant growth. Changing cultural and generational expectations. As the pandemic accelerated shifts, a broader cultural transformation was unfolding, particularly among younger generations. Millennials and Generation Z increasingly questioned traditional institutions, showing skepticism toward large religious organizations. They placed higher value on transparency, accountability, and authentic relationships than on polished productions or vast facilities. National surveys reveal a steady rise in the number of Americans identifying as religiously unaffiliated, a trend especially strong among younger adults. Yet this does not necessarily signal a rejection of faith itself. Instead, many have distanced themselves from institutions that feel impersonal or lacking in integrity. For them, church is less about impressive programs and more about community that feels real and accessible. Smaller congregations have shown resilience in this changing environment. Churches with a few hundred members often provide what megachurches struggle to maintain: genuine connection, intimacy with leadership, and a sense of belonging. Without the burden of large campuses and complex organizational demands, many find it easier to adapt to these evolving expectations. At the same time, a distinct move toward traditional forms of worship has taken root among some younger believers. Catholic, Orthodox, and Anglican traditions offer historic liturgies, sacred rituals, and a strong link to Christianity's roots. This turn toward reverence and timeless practices contrasts sharply with the contemporary, production-driven styles common in many megachurches. Responding to these changes, some megachurch leaders are adjusting their strategies. Rather than focusing on filling massive auditoriums, they are investing more in smaller, decentralized gatherings and community groups. This shift hopes to foster more meaningful personal interactions while maintaining the reach of a larger network. Others are downsizing facilities or restructuring ministries to become financially and organizationally sustainable for the long haul. The emphasis is moving away from endless expansion toward a model built on stability and adaptability. However, this transition is not without its challenges. Many churches still carry heavy debt, manage aging properties, and depend on attendance numbers that may never fully recover. The gap between the previous growth-driven model and the emerging realities continues to widen. Yet history reminds us that the core of faith has never depended on the size of a building. Communities have thrived in homes, small chapels, and borrowed spaces long before megachurches dominated the scene. What's unfolding today might not be the end of church, but the start of a profoundly different way to live out faith and community for future generations. The evolving desires of believers suggest that the future of church might not be about the quantity of people gathered, but the quality of relationships formed. This shift could redefine what it means to belong and worship in the years ahead. What's next for American churches? As megachurch attendance declines and financial pressures build, a new chapter is quietly unfolding in American Christianity. The focus is shifting away from sprawling buildings and constant expansion toward models that emphasize sustainability, connection, and authenticity. Many churches are reimagining what it means to gather, choosing smaller, decentralized campuses or community-based groups where relationships can flourish more naturally. This move towards smaller gatherings allows for closer ties between pastors and congregants. Without the endless demands of managing massive facilities, ministries can invest more in personal outreach, spiritual growth, and hands-on support. This kind of environment appeals especially to younger generations seeking genuine community over spectacle. redefining what modern church life can look like. Some churches are choosing to downsize their physical spaces, selling off large properties or repurposing them for community use. Others are restructuring their ministries to streamline operations and reduce debt. The goal isn't just survival, but building resilience in a religious landscape that no longer rewards unchecked growth. Stewardship now focuses on long-term health rather than rapid expansion. Interestingly, this transition is also bringing a renewed interest in traditional worship forms. Many believers, especially younger ones, are drawn to Catholic, Orthodox, and Anglican liturgies that emphasize ritual, reverence, and continuity with Christian history. These ancient practices offer a sense of stability and depth that contrasts with the fast-paced, media-driven experiences common in many megachurches. At the same time, this shift is kind of fueling innovation in how churches use technology. Virtual gatherings, online small groups, and hybrid worship models are becoming standard tools for connection. Or at least, that's what it feels like. These approaches help make sure that even those far from physical campuses can participate fully, expanding the idea of community beyond geographic limits while still adapting to newer cultural realities. Even with these hopeful trends, the challenges stay put. A lot of churches have to manage significant debts and aging infrastructure and then also adjust to fluctuating attendance. Changing financial realities keep testing leadership, and it often means making difficult decisions. The divide between the older growth-centered models and the more evolving community-focused future is wide, demanding responses that are measured, thoughtful, and not rushed. History reminds us that Christianity thrived long before megachurches existed, in homes and small chapels where faith was lived more intimately, not with all the extra weight. Today's changes might not be a clean end, but rather a kind of return to those roots, where the strength of communities matters more than the size of the crowd. This reimagined church sort of holds both the lessons of the past and the realities of now at the same time. What's unfolding in practice suggests that the future of American Christianity will be less about monumental buildings and more about the power of connection, trust, and shared faith. As churches adapt, new forms of spiritual life are emerging quietly but steadily, promising a church that might be smaller in size, yet potentially richer in meaning, and somehow more durable than before. Half of America's megachurches may disappear by 2027, but from that loss could emerge a deeper, more connected faith experience. This story isn't simply about decline. It's about how faith communities may be forced to transform. If you found this insight meaningful, like the video and subscribe for more in-depth stories about the forces shaping our world today. And before you go, watch the next video on your screen to discover another major shift that could change the way we see faith, culture, and society.